Hello, welcome to Romero Threads on YouTube, where it's all about embroidery. Today's video is called the Ultimate Embroidery Cheat Sheet. And this video is going to be a prerequisite for our embroidery school, which will air live every Saturday morning. So that way we can take care of the basic stuff. And there are going to be some classes where I'm going to be moving fast. So as long as we have some of the basic stuff taken care of, okay, we can move along without having to explain everything over and over and over and over. So that's the main goal of today's video. So 3 important topics I want to talk about today. I'm going to quickly talk about 20 definitions that we all have to know. And these are 20 definitions that we encounter every day. Anytime you're embroidering, you're always going to see these 20 definitions. So when I'm talking about these definitions, I'm also going to show you an example in the software. Right after definitions, we're going to talk about objects and why they are so important. And then the third item that we're going to talk about is combining objects. And this is where we're going to see all of our definitions that we talk about. We're going to see them in live action with our objects. So in today's class, it's going to be packed with information. Make sure you bookmark this video because trust me, you are going to use this throughout the year as a resource. And also make sure you set your notifications for Saturday morning, 8 o'clock Central, 6 o'clock Pacific, 9 o'clock Eastern. Every Saturday morning, we're gonna go live and we're gonna go very, very deep into embroidery this whole 2022 year. Okay, so let's go ahead, let's get into the software and let's talk about 20 definitions that we all have to know. Okay, now before we start, whatever software that you're using, a lot of this stuff, we're on the basic level, so it should be compatible with every type of software that's out there. Maybe certain locations are different from software to software, but all these definitions that we're talking about today, okay, you should see them on all different types of software. Also, we're gonna start very basic and slowly move on up. Okay, so definition number 1 is, of course, a stitch. Okay, everything starts with a stitch. Okay, when we're talking about a stitch, you're talking literally about a thread connecting with the bobbin. Okay, as soon as that needle comes in that first time, that's your first stitch. So when we're talking about stitches, we're always talking about thousands of stitches. When you're digitizing, you're just checking the lines, the design lines, but these dots here, that's a stitch. Okay, so this is our first stitch here. This is our second stitch. All right, as soon as that first needle drops, you're gonna see the thread right there. The thread came in. Right, so that's a stitch. Very basic, okay? Nothing too difficult yet. Now we're gonna start adding information on this stitch. Definition number 2 is our run stitch. So this stitch here is a run stitch. We are literally moving from one location to the next, all in one line. Examples of a run stitch, you can go straight like this. Okay, but you can move the locations the way your run stitch travels. Okay, so this is still a run stitch. It's just moving from different locations. Okay, so when we're talking about a run stitch, this is what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about your stitch is moving from one side to another. Let's talk about our start and stop. Okay, so here you see this green box. This is always where it's going to start, and every run stitch has a start and it has a stop. This red cross here, that's your stop. Now, what's so cool about this is you can actually swap these out. So if you want to start here on the other side, notice how our stop just switched to the other side. Okay, very useful, especially when we're getting into the details of digitizing. Very useful to know that you can change your start stop. Okay, this one here, another easy one, okay? But what we're going to do, we're gonna combine all this information that we got and we're gonna be moving fast when we're digitizing. Okay, next definition is tie in, tie out. Every stitch, when you start your first stitch, you have to tie in because what you're doing is you're locking in that stitch, okay? Usually it's 5 stitches to do a tie-in. That's just locking in our stitches. All right, and it's the same thing at the end. It's gonna tie off. All right, so anytime you see a tie off or a tie in, you know that the stitches are doing those 5 stitches just to lock in that stitch. Okay, now one thing to notice is when you do a tie-in or a tie-out, you're gonna see a visible tie-in or a tie-out. Okay, you can tell where people tie in, tie out, because usually it has a little bulkiness to that area, as you can see here. Okay, because that's just where the needle went back and forth 2 or 3 times. That leads us to definition number 5, and that is our trim. Okay, this triangle here, these are your trims. Anytime you see a triangle, that is a trim. That means the machine is going to stop here, do a tie out. As you can see, our tie outs are here, and it's going to cut. So anytime you see a triangle, that means you have a cut. And it's very useful because sometimes you want to minimize your trims and you want to locate exactly where your trims are at. So you're always looking for this triangle to make sure you have an actual triangle or an actual trim that you want to have. Okay, because sometimes when you're digitizing fast and quick, you're gonna overlook some of these trims, and by you seeing that triangle, you can confirm if that's an actual trim that you want to have. So here I have a cheat sheet available so you can see the different types of run stitch. Okay, there are so many different types of run stitch, and they're all broken down by their characteristics. Make sure to follow our Facebook page, which is linked down below. And I'm gonna post a lot of these pictures on our Facebook. And moving forward, I'm gonna be posting a lot of the free stuff there on Facebook. Okay, so make sure you follow the page, just so anytime I have something to put out, okay, I can easily, quickly put it out on the Facebook page, and there you go, you got it. Okay, definition number 6 is our satin stitch. These are how our satin stitches look like. They vary in width. Okay, that's really what categorizes our satin stitches, and of course other features which we're going to talk about in a bit. When we're dealing with satin stitches, you have a lot of possibilities. You have different features that you can add or remove. All these little small tweaks and details that you can have play a big role, especially if you're doing hundreds and hundreds of garments. Little small details start playing a big role. Definition number 7, okay, it is a feature of our satin stitch. Okay, our satin stitches, they're categorized by 2 numbers. All right, so the first one, let's talk about the first one, which is definition number 7, that is density. Here, you can't see through my satin stitch, okay? So that means it has a lower amount of density. All right, here, you can see through it. It has less density. So let's see exactly what our density is. So when we break it down, our density is the measurement, okay, from this side to when it comes back over here on this side. All right, so we're looking about this distance here, and this is probably half of that density. Okay, so it's very small in comparison. If your satin stitch is looking real light and you can see through it, it might be because you don't have enough density. When you get to this area here, you have a high amount of density. Okay, so that's like 2 millimeters of density compared to this one. We're at probably 0.5. Now let's go with definition number 8, and that is length. That's just saying what's the distance from this side all the way to here. So we're talking about 9.36. Satin stitches, 2 numbers you got to know. You got to know the density and the length. That's how we categorize satin stitch. That's what separates satin stitches. One last thing I want to add about satin stitches. Okay, satin stitches, traditionally, you don't want to go below 1.5 millimeters, and you don't want to go above anywhere, I would say 7 through 9 millimeters. Okay, you don't want to be bigger than that. Your machine probably won't allow you to do anything larger than 12 millimeters. Okay, let's talk about another very important item, which is underlay. So notice a lot of times if your satin stitch, if you want it to be as straight as can be, if you don't want it to start shifting or having registration problems, what you want to do, and this goes for any type of stitch, okay, what you want to do is add some underlay. Okay, so this is what underlay looks like. It's pretty much a base. Okay, so some of the popular underlays that we have a single run. So if your satin stitches are very thin, okay, very thin, of course you don't want to put over excessive amount of underlay. My bad if I'm zooming in and out. That's just kind of how I speed up stuff. All right, but when you see this thin line, okay, that's for your narrow stitches. As you start getting bigger and bigger with your satin stitches, now you want to start introducing more underlay. Okay, so this one here is another popular one. This is your outer edge. Of course, we have our zigzag, another popular one, and then our double zigzag with an edge run. Okay, very important is to add underlay. That way your stitches have a nice base. Okay, so anytime I'm talking about underlay, I'm talking about the base of our actual stitches. So those are other definitions we're definitely going to use a lot of times when we're digitizing. Let's talk about definition number 13, that is tatami stitches. Okay, what tatami stitches are, they're fill stitches. So with our fill stitch, it's the same rules, okay? The length of our stitch, so from one stitch to another, and the spacing, so our density. So once again, I have this handy cheat sheet that you can use to kind of compare how much length, how much density you need. Definition number 15, nodes. Nodes. Okay, what is a node? Node are these little squares or circles. Okay, so when it's a circle, that means you're doing a round. Your design is going rounded. Square, okay, square means you got a corner. Here, just by switching this to a rounded node, okay, same thing here. Could add this, and now I can turn this into a circle. All right, let me show you a more basic type example. Okay, these are my nodes. All right, you can add nodes. All right, so look at here. I just added a node. I added another node, added another node. So what this helps me, I can now redesign that straight line. I can make it look like that now. Okay, and then once again, your nodes, square means a sharp corner. And then if you put, for us, it's spacebar. Put a spacebar, it's rounded. Now you don't have a sharp turn, okay? You have a smooth circular type, okay? Same thing here, okay? And then here, if I change it from a sharp pivot, okay? If I change it to a circle, that's how it looks, okay? So when I talk about nodes, I'm talking about these that are shaping our design, okay? So here, you saw it here, H, so you could put it back to being a square. So here, box it, here, space, all right? So we put it back to a square, okay? Very, very useful, powerful nodes, okay? Nodes, you're gonna see how useful they are, all right? You're gonna see how useful they are, especially, I use them a lot when I'm doing text, and you're gonna see how I go about matching the perfect text using nodes. Definition number 16, angles. Let's get a quick example here. All right, let's make this a little thinner. Let's put it at 1. All right, so I push the H here, okay, H, you see my nodes? Here, this line here, very important. So this is the direction I want my stitches to go. So if we push a replay, let me put no underlay, 0 underlay. Okay, just so when I do this replay, you see this? This is the angle. I'm telling the file the direction I want to go. Okay, but let's say I don't want to go from here, right? I want to go from the bottom up. Okay, what you're gonna do, you go to the reshape. Now you control this. If you push down the control button as you're moving, it'll move into angles of 15. All right, that way you get a good clean 0. All right, and now start here. Okay, when I replay this, okay, now I'm starting from the bottom on up. So very important why angles play a big role. Okay, definition number 17, pool compensation. All right, so let's see what pull compensation means. This is my actual design. This line here, okay, coming down, this is my actual design. But what pull comp is, okay, if our needle were to hit that line and pull in, okay, what happens is every stitch, anytime you do a stitch, okay, you are pulling. You are going to pull. So you always add a pull comp. Usually standard is 0.17 pull compensation, but you'll see as you're working with stretcher type objects, you might have to add. So let's do something over exaggerated. Let's go 5. And when I push enter right now, notice how this outside stitch is gonna move more outwards. Okay, so there you go, it moved out. That means I'm just adding extra reach on that stitch. Eventually we're gonna get into details with the pull comp, but when I'm talking about pull comp, I'm just saying, hey, I'm gonna add whatever I'm designing. I want my design to go a little bit more outside, just so it won't lose registration and so I can get an actual stitch. And definition number 18 is swatches. All right, so this is a swatch, right? You're just talking about boxes with different types of information. This is information that I want to start providing more of. A lot of handy information, okay? So when I talk about swatches, if I'm saying, hey, refer to this swatch here, okay, what I'm talking about is we're using a reference point, something that we've already stitched out. So when we're talking about swatches, like let's say paint, right? When you talk about paint and you want to choose the perfect color paint, you're going to go through swatches and you're going to see the difference between the different shades or the different colors. All right. In our case, when we talk about swatches, we're talking about different stitches with different properties. Very useful information. Okay. Our last definition for right now, before we move on to the next topic, is duplicate. Okay. Duplicate. Very, very useful, right? Because sometimes we're gonna have to do certain shapes, certain designs over and over and over and over, and you don't always have to recreate everything over and over and over and over. There's different ways to duplicate. You can go to your edit, okay? It has Control D, right, as your hotkey. So if we click on it, Control D, all right, now you have a duplicate here. On Wilcom and on a lot of other ones, there's even a faster way to do it. I just right click and drag. Okay, that's like instant duplicate there. All right, so very useful for the duplicate. So if you ever see me pull out a quick design just like that, okay, that's what I'm doing. I'm just duplicating. Or if I'm pushing Control D, okay, I'm just duplicating. All right, so, okay, these were common definitions that we have right now. Of course, there is hundreds of other definitions, right? And other items that we're going to use. So as we're moving forward, I'm just going to introduce more and more and more. All right, so let's go ahead on the second part of this training. Now that we talked about some of the most important definitions that we're going to encounter over and over and over and over, let's talk about objects. Pretty much all designs revolve around objects. And what are objects? Okay, objects are like shapes. So let's go into the software. All right, and let's discuss objects. So I'm going to discuss objects through shapes. Okay, so here I'm just going to pick a very popular shape that we have here. Okay, most programs, they have all these built-in shapes, borders, okay, which are very useful. So real quick, let's go over some stuff right here. Okay, because there's a lot of good information happening. The way we know it's an object, okay, so here on the right, so here if you're looking at my screen, you see on the right, okay, we have one object, so it's one shape. I duplicate this, okay, now I have two objects. Second object that I have here, I can change that from a fill stitch to an outline stitch. So if I switch it to an outline stitch, I now have two objects. I have this object here, let's change colors. Okay, down below, I have one object. And on top, I have a second object. Okay, so when we're talking about objects, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about two different shapes, and each of these shapes, they have their own properties. Now, if I just build a square, okay, this is another object. Now, if I analyze this shape here, and I go to the reshape, and every software has a reshape tool, okay, we can see where's our start, Where's our stop? So we have control of that. We have control of our angles. This is all happening in one object. And we could also control the density. Okay, so if we want it not too dense, if you want it to be see-through, all right, you put it here. If you want it to be just regular dense, okay, the 0.4. And we're gonna talk about all these common densities that we work with. So objects, when I'm talking about an object, I'm talking about a shape. And it doesn't have to be a perfect shape, okay? Anything can be an object. A blob, okay? If we just draw blobs, right? If we just draw this, okay? This here is a shape, okay? It probably doesn't have a proper shape name, but it is considered a shape and it has its own properties. And this is a closed shape. Of course, we have open shapes. This shape here is also considered a shape. So whether it's a closed shape or an open shape, they're all shapes. They are all objects. Okay, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because we're going to combine objects just the same way I did this one here. These are two objects combined to give you a design. And then I could always come back and start tweaking properties. All right, so objects, anytime I refer to something as an object, what I'm talking about is a shape, a specific piece of the puzzle of our design. So let's go into our third part of today's training, which is combining objects. The best example that I have when it comes time for combining objects are texts. All right, so here I just have a regular basic, our block 2, which everybody has block 2. Okay, everybody has block 2. And right now it looks very nice. It looks pretty because all of our objects, all of our shapes, they're all perfectly aligned and perfectly set up so they could look like text. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna duplicate this 3 times. I'm gonna duplicate this 3 times. Right now, here my file, here, I start here. This circle means this is where the needle first drops. Notice there's no triangle here. It's all being done without a cut. I don't have a cut till here. What I could do, I could break this apart. So Control K does the break apart. Now, okay, and then we could break it apart again. Okay, now we have broken it down to its smallest object. Okay, very powerful tool there. Okay, so really when you're doing text, all you're really doing is combining objects. When we combine these and you do everything in order, now we're getting these stitches, the stitches that we want. So here, the reason why I brought up shapes, because if you look at it, that's really what our text is. When we deal with text, this is nothing but a rectangle. Okay, this is a rectangle. You could even break it apart even more. We can lose this. Now you have control, all right? So you see the angle. So everything we talked about on the definitions, now you see it. Now you see how we can make certain adjustments. So during our Saturday morning embroidery school, you're gonna see me messing around with these nodes. You're gonna see me tweaking little stuff. All right, so those 3 topics we talked about today, okay? That pretty much sums up what digitizing and what embroidery revolves around. So thank you for stopping by today, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace out.